Hi, and thank you for considering a career with the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency, Child Welfare Services. I am Dr. Kimberly Gerardina, the Director for Child Welfare Services. This video is designed to give potential job applicants, like yourself, a realistic view of what it's like to work in Child Welfare Services. I hope this video gives you some good information about our values as a child welfare system and the work we do to help children and families. Our vision is to ensure that every child grows up safe and nurtured. In alignment with the County of San Diego's Live Well San Diego vision, our Safety Enhanced Together practice framework outlines our vision, values, guiding principles, and explains the what, the why, and the how of our work. Our priority in child welfare is to safely stabilize and preserve families. We approach our work from an equity lens so that all families are supported while ensuring the safety of children. You will now have the opportunity to hear from some of our staff about what it's like to work in child welfare services. I hope you enjoy hearing from them.
When I think about giving advice to someone who's interested in this field, I think about us being just a piece of that puzzle in a family's life. We're there for a brief snapshot in time. We may not see the outcome of each of our interventions has on that family. So while we are intervening and assessing for risk and safety and providing resources for them, we're planting seeds of hope. We're guiding them to their next plan for their family, but we may not always see the outcome. We're just a part of the story.
With every family having different needs and having different timelines, we need to be able to juggle all of that and at the same time putting out fires and providing crisis intervention to families, as well as simple things like returning emails, phone calls, and consulting with those in our office. A lot of times people come into this role thinking about the traditional social worker role, which is supporting families through socioeconomic challenges, mental and emotional health challenges. And while that is a component of what we do, primarily we focus on safety. And sometimes, when we try to focus on safety, our contacts with the families are not as in-depth as we like. And as long as the kids are safe, sometimes we don't need to be involved anymore. We try to do our best to provide referrals, but we can't continue to stay with a family to do therapeutic type services with them.
When you're dealing with families who are in crisis, they're going to react in ways that you can't always predict. Sometimes that's overwhelming sadness and tears and just chaos in general. Sometimes it's anger, and that anger is often going to be directed at you. People are going to call you names. They're going to tell you that you're ruining their life. They're going to blame you for things that aren't your fault, aren't your responsibility. And you're going to have to let that roll off of you and not take it personally, because this is a traumatic time for not only the parents that you're dealing with, but also for the kids and the rest of the family at large. You're also going to learn from different professionals who have education and knowledge about things that may be in direct opposition to how your personal belief system is. And you're going to have an open mind to be able to take on that information and to use it in a way that allows you to help the families and the children that you serve. So being able to put aside all of those inherent biases that you may come in with or preconceived notions that you have is really important to do a good job in the field of child protection.
This job entails a lot of different types of work. You're asked to be very adaptable. You have to shift gears very quickly. You could be out in someone's home at 10 o'clock in the morning and you could be in court testifying at 1:30 that same day. You have to be able to multitask, meet a lot of hard deadlines. There are a lot of demands placed on you. You make some very critical decisions for families and children. You are supported. You don't make those decisions alone, but you have to understand that you have to talk to community providers. You have to deal with law enforcement, the court system, all sorts of different entities, professional and personal, to come to the best conclusion for a family. You have to come from a position of empathy, but yet you have to have firm boundaries. You can't have so much empathy that you can place a child in danger, but you have to have empathy for where the family is and also belief of where they can go with our help and with help of service providers. We come from a strength-based, trauma-informed position.
It's important to be comfortable knowing that the information that you gather needs to be reported back, not only to your supervisor, but in a form of a court report that actually will end up before a judge like myself. And this court will review that report, and what this court would prefer to see in that report is factual information. So it is important that you are objective in how you state your findings in the report. It also is important to know that the recommendations that you may suggest may not be followed by the court.
A lot of us are parents. I've been a social worker, like I said, for 19 years, and I have 2 kids who have definitely know what it's like for their mom to be a social worker. The challenges is that I've missed volleyball meets, I've missed school plays, and the kids understand, but it's hard. It's hard to miss those things when you spend your day helping everyone else and other families with their problems, but you, your own, are missing something at home for your family.
This isn't a glamorous job by any means. We are not hanging out with kids all day, having the most fun and being the hero. We are often working with families who are at their lowest. That also means where we might be stepping into situations which could be potentially dangerous. So it is just important to keep that in mind and just be aware that at the end of the day, we are focusing on child safety, permanency, and well-being.
We find ourselves working overtime, whether it be 10:30 at night at a hospital, sitting with a family waiting to hear the results from a child abuse expert. Other times it is staying up late to write a court report with a pending deadline. Other times we have to demonstrate flexibility in meeting our families where they're at. And if they can't meet with us during business hours, then we try to be flexible and meet with them after hours and sometimes even on weekends.
So I think one of the challenges is their workload. I mean, let's be honest, I'm not a social worker, but I know enough and incredible amount of work that they need to do, and they need to do their job correctly because, again, it's about the child.
In this job, you have to do a lot of writing. You have to write contacts every day, but you also have to write court reports, professional writing that is viewed by judges and even appellate courts.
The focus of the juvenile court, particularly in juvenile dependency, is to rehabilitate and reunify. And so if we're going to accomplish that goal, we need to have transparency, we need to have empathy, we need to have understanding, and we need to have an open mind so that way the facts can come forth for the court to make an informed decision that will be best to meet the needs of the family.
It would be awesome if you got to really be an everyday part of that child's life, but unfortunately it doesn't usually end up that way because you have a lot of children and a lot of work to do, a lot of work.
You may think of abuse and think broken bones and burns and bruises and starvation, and that is a lot of what you're going to see. But sometimes it's a lot more subtle than that. Sometimes it's a singular bruise on an infant child who isn't moving, and that singular bruise is just as indicative of abuse as a severe burn in an older child. So being able to recognize that you're going to see a spectrum of abusive injuries and being able to understand that just because it looks seemingly minor doesn't mean that it's minor for that child is really important. And while we're on the topic of the spectrum, sometimes abuse doesn't have any physical findings. Sometimes there are emotional aspects to abuse, like witnessing intimate partner violence, which is probably the most damaging thing that can happen to you as a child. So the child may not have any outward signs at all that they're being harmed, but what's being harmed is their psyche, and that can lead to really significant long-term negative effects.
So the most severe case I had as a worker was when I was in court intervention. That case involved a 8-week-old baby that was admitted into the hospital with 21 fractures. Those fractures were in different stages of healing, and the medical evidence showed that that was indicative of multiple acts of abuse. And I held that case for about 7 months through the court process and dealing with supervising visits and trying to engage those parents in cooperating with the agency, which became very difficult as those parents were not speaking to the agency. They didn't want to admit any wrongdoing or say anything that would jeopardize their ability to receive services from the agency. That case ended up in a long court hearing, over 6 hours of myself being on the stand testifying, having personal attacks lobbied at me from counsels, to every detail that us as an agency provided to them being scrutinized and picked apart. But you know, the ultimate goal was to achieve safety for that family, and that what kept me motivated to provide those services and hopefully, you know, make sure that we got to the root of what happened and provide a better, stable outcome for that child.
While there are many types of stressors, secondary trauma happens when we are emotionally impacted by what we hear, what we see, when we are working with families that have experienced abuse and trauma. Trauma for our families might relate to domestic violence, substance abuse, child neglect, and child physical and sexual abuse. At Child Welfare, we do a tremendous amount of work on mitigating secondary trauma symptoms, things like heightened anxiety, difficulty sleeping, recurring thoughts or memories of what we have seen and what we've heard. It can be tough to see and hear about abuse, especially to children and to the overall harm to relationships and families. So how do we mitigate secondary traumatic stress? Building resiliency is key. Taking good care of yourself is also important. Doing things you enjoy, spending time with family and friends, getting support from coworkers, and being able to acknowledge, experience, and wade through feelings, the good ones and the painful ones. These coping strategies all help with mitigating the impact of secondary trauma.
I'm a firm believer that secondary trauma is real. That case stuck with me when I was carrying the case. I lived it, I dreamed it. If I did not have the support I had in the forms of my supervisors and colleagues, I probably would not be with the agency today.
I feel like the role of the social worker can be a very rewarding job, helping families reunite and helping families overcome their struggles, but I also feel like it could be a very dark job. Take a toll on the social worker, and you're going to have to manage your self-care and really be aware of your own emotions, because it's a real hard job at times.
I think in this field you will just find people with the biggest hearts, the craziest humor, and so I've definitely connected with people who I feel like I can cry and I can laugh with, and really make me feel like I'm not alone when I'm doing this work.
So some of the things that have made it easy for me to stay within the county, even with all of those challenges, is that there's always ongoing support. Everyone is always reaching out to make sure that you have what you need, and even when they aren't reaching out, you have the ability to reach out to them. So something that I found really helpful was just, one, getting comfortable within my unit, really making a partnership with some of the more seasoned or the more experienced social workers. So if I have a question or have a situation that I've never run into before, I'm able to get some guidance from them. I loved creating a bridge between there being a need and then us finding something within the community that could support those families. So I feel like as a social worker, that has been a priority of mine. So when I'm going in and creating this assessment for safety, I'm then also assessing, like, well, what else does this family need, or what could help support this family to not require the agency's higher level of intervention.
There was one case that I was thinking of where I worked with a child who was neglected by a step-parent, and we had to remove him. He was a teenager, and as a teenager, he was pretty closed off. I felt like I really couldn't get to him or find out what he needed. I did my best, obviously. But about 2 years later, I received an email from one of my coworkers in adoptions who said, so-and-so had been adopted today, it was finalized, and he found his forever home, and it was the same home I placed him in. and I know he was happy there, and that made me happy. But then she also wrote in the email that he wanted to say hi to me and that he felt that I had helped him. And that really got to me. I mean, I cried at my desk because it made me realize that I do work, I do good work, I do make a difference.
Very early in my career, I was told a story from one of these great leaders that taught me social work. And she told me the story about a little girl walking down the beach, and there was thousands of starfish that had washed ashore from a big storm. And she said that the little girl, one by one, was throwing starfish back into the ocean. And a gentleman came up to her, kind of mocking her, and said, "What are you doing? There's no way you're gonna make a difference. Look at all these starfish." And the little girl held up the starfish and said, "It matters to this one." And that story is why I'm still here after 20 years, because every day I have the distinct honor to serve a child or a family and help them find their path.
I hope you've learned a little more about what it's like working for Child Welfare Services. Our Safety Enhanced Together practice framework focuses on relationships with children, youth families, resource families, community partners, legal partners, and one another. We strive for a workplace culture characterized by appreciation, reflection, ongoing learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And while there are challenges working in this field, it's also very rewarding. After more than 20 years in child welfare, it still keeps me motivated when I see the impact we make on the lives of children and families. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about Child Welfare Services, and I hope that this helps you to know that this career is the right fit for you.